Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, presented by Zwift for a very, very weird stage from Camargo to Cistierna. It is pretty flat, except for a 20-kilometer Cat 1 at about 6% in the middle of the stage, with 60 Ks of sort of false flat downhill runoff with no other climbs afterwards. It's on like a 1,000-meter plateau. I think we're in the Castilla Leon region of Spain, south of the Asturias, and just very, very weird. Would it be a break? Would it be the time for Trek to go for Pedersen or Bike Exchange for Groves if they could drop Melier and Bennett? And as always, this show is sponsored by, presented by Zwift. Zwift Academy is back for 2022. Registration is open now, whether you're aiming for a pro contract like Jay Vine, who won yesterday, or Neve Bradbury, or you're just looking to kickstart your fitness with some structured training sessions. Zwift Academy is a great excuse to get you going into winter, or if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, into summer, with 6 workouts to complete solo or in groups, with baseline rides to compare your progress before and after Zwift Academy. So check out Zwift at Zwift.com through the link down below. The break, Benji, pretty strong one with Harry Sweeney in it as well, who didn't get picked for the Tour for Lotto.
Not the only Australian in there as well. We've got actually, the only Australian in there. Fred Wright is not Australian. I don't know why I was considering him as Australian for a second.
The Commonwealth Games got you so confused. You're still confused after the Commonwealth Games explanation.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when it comes to the other riders in the groups, I'm thinking about Jimmy Janssens of Alpecin de Koning. Time trial rider, not sure about his kick after a breakaway stage, for example. We have Battistella. He's the guy that ended up winning the U23 World Championships when Niels Eekhoff was disqualified for drafting, I think, during that race. And since then, I think he's been pretty good in like the Italian smaller classics, not necessarily purely hilly ones, but the ones where Anizzolo, for example, won that one, I think, last year or the year before. Like those kind of ones. Anyway, that's the type of rider Battistella is. Herrada was in there as well. Climbing type, I think he was fighting with Thomas again on top of Chalet Renard at some point. I vaguely remember that. Von too. And then the last rider in that group was Omer Goldstein, climbing type on Israel Premier Tech. But when you look at that breakaway, what I see is that there's certain teams in there in Israel where I was like, this is a team that could have been pacing in the peloton perhaps for a Bevan or something. But that's not going to be the case because Omer Goldstein is in the breakaway. What teams are left to be pacing in the peloton then? We spoke about it on the podcast yesterday. This stage has that climb in the middle that you just mentioned, and it's the kind of climb that could make it troublesome for the pure sprinters, for a Bennett and so forth. And Trek and Bex both decided to make this stage a bit harder for those pure sprinters because they started pacing with Bernard for Trek at the bottom and a rider for Bex as well at the bottom of the Puerto de San Glorio climb. And when that started happening, I was like, okay, this is going to be very intriguing because the gap at the bottom of the climb to the breakaway is about 3 minutes and a half, roughly. And usually, I think you mentioned this quite a lot, in those breakaway stages where the peloton miscalculates the breakaway, the climbs are the most important part, where there you see whether the peloton has to lose time to the breakaway or not. And like, what was the dynamic you feel on this stage, for example, between the breakaway and the peloton on that climb?
Well, you want to pace at a decent pace to drop Melier and Bennett, granted, but Groves and Pedersen, they're still not top 20 GC climbers, so you can't go too quick. And Wright climbs really well. Jesus Herrada and Battistella climb really well. Janssens maybe not so much, but like 3.5 minutes is a lot. And then your domestiques are spending a lot on the climb, so how much can they pace afterwards? And then if you're the only team, it's just classic. Like, you just can't give it 3 minutes plus. You need to be at a minute on the climb and then do your thing. It's just people want to catch the breakaway. They don't want to catch it too early. It was like, well, maybe you should, because then there's a lot of problems afterwards. We saw Trek pacing. They spent all their team just about pacing for Pedersen. I don't know if Pedersen also said, you got to slow down a bit. Merlier dropped And Bex didn't really want to pace too much either. Like, this is a 20-kilometer, 6% climb. Like, it's a long climb for sprinters. And yeah, the break was doing it fine. So the gap did shoot down really fast to 2:30, but then it stabilized at 2:46. And you know that there's going to be a period I think Bennett dropped a little bit. He did really well on this
Yep.
climb, but only 30 seconds. So Trek now have to, or Trek or Bike Exchange or whoever have to, no Alpecin, they got to pace 60 Ks on the flat and keep Bennett behind and chase the break on their own. Impossible task. Alex Kirsch can't do it on his own. And their team, who did they not bring? Edward Turns. So they brought a weird team too. Or they wait and they let Bennett come back, and then Bora might help them, and they didn't really help them. So then you're giving time back to Breakaway. So it's just, yeah, it's really advantage break, even with that 60 Ks, particularly when Benji, this break is, then they're working really well the whole time. The pressure, this reminded me a lot of that Bike Exchange stage chasing Court, Simmons, Baggioli in the Vuelta last year, where the break was almost at 2 minutes the whole time. And because they kept working the whole time, it's impossible to bring them back.
Exactly, that's very true. And I started feeling just after the top, the second that Bennett had dropped already, was on those 30 seconds, that it would become troublesome indeed to keep it going. That the break would have the advantage, because then you need to calculate there's 5 riders left. Omer Goldstein dropped from the breakaway, so 5 riders left pacing against the riders at the front of the peloton, and those riders were not enough. It was, I think, 1 rider of Trek left and a few riders of Bex left, because the tempo at the top was so significant in the peloton that a lot of riders actually got in trouble at the top. Side note, Remco Evenepoel, his team is Quickstep, obviously. And at the top of this San Glorio climb, I went back and checked the tape. All but 2 domestiques were dropped off Quickstep on this climb, with more than 50 riders left. Is that shocking to you, or do you think that they were like, oh, what's gonna happen? Like, we don't need to like overly try and stick ourselves with Remco today. Do you think that it's an issue that so many dropped?
I mean, it's just not news, I guess. Like, there, Cavagna was working. Yeah, I don't expect him to make it over. Seri, three Stevenons. I mean, yeah, like Masnada, like, it is kind of surprising. He should have Masnada, Alaphilippe, Van Wilder, Vivaika should all be there, really. And it's
Yeah.
like for Peñas Blancas in week 2, it's like, oh, Remco could use that to attack. But like, I know his team did a bit better yesterday, but what pace are they going to set on Peñas Blancas? Like, he has to rely on other teams or do it himself. But yeah, it didn't really matter in the end, to be honest. And then it came down to a
Yeah.
battle between the break and the Peloton chasing. Bike Exchange put some riders forward for Caden Groves, who didn't get
Wait,
a win in the Netherlands.
credits to Arkea for a second there, because I feel like there was a moment, a specific moment after the climb, where Trek kind of gave up. Bex wasn't pacing yet after the climb, and there was a moment where there was only Quickstep riders at the front, where no one was pacing for about 20 seconds. And Arkea was the one that got a rider to the front first, with 2 Bex riders on the left side of the road, and kickstarted the chase again. Because if that does not happen there, if Arkea or Bex do not respond, this is a easy breakaway stage from that point onwards. But Arkea and Bex put it up there. They keep going, like you mentioned, and that's how we get to a situation where it's actually close between the peloton and the breakaway, right?
Like, yes and no. When you look at the resource, like when they're holding the gap stable and they're not bringing it under 50, and it's like 10 Ks to go, and they've already spent a lot of domestiques and the break's still working, then it's advantage break when it's 5, 6 riders. You know, Sweeney, Janssen's right, Battistella, Herrada. These are strong guys. Some of them very experienced in breakaways, particularly Wright, Battistella, Janssen. They're all strong guys, really. And yeah, at that point, I was like, it's done. Like, you can't, teams come forward, they spend a run, like, they stop and they don't help.
Yeah.
And Bora already have 2 sprint wins, so they don't really care. So Breakaway was winning. Question was, the pressure from the Peloton, I feel like they almost overestimated the breakaway. Like the break would
Mhm.
end up winning by 30 seconds, but there wasn't too much cat and mousing or attacking. They seemed pretty content to go to a sprint. Fred Wright was the heavy favorite from that sprint. So it's all playing, this is like for Magnus Cort, played really well into Magnus Cort's hands. When you're the strongest sprinter, you want pressure from the peloton behind because it discourages people attacking you from further out that you have to mark. And so there was barely any of that. Maybe a move from Sweeney. And unfortunately for Fred Wright, I like Fred Wright. He gives a great interview, seems really nice, but he completely bottled this finish. He went to the front, let it out, and it's fine to like lead it out softly to if you want to go in the front and not get boxed in. But he launched it over 300 meters to go, and gave the draft on a quick, I think, semi-downhill finish to
Yeah.
everybody, to Janssens, then Harada. Harada gets into his slipstream, comes out right, finishes his sprint at 50 meters to go. He's done, and then Harada just beats Battistella, who just came too late from deep. So unfortunate for Wright. Harada wins, though, for Cofidis. Not this. I thought he'd win yesterday in the morning. I was looking. I was like, nice stage for him. His second Vuelta win from a reduced group flat sprint. Like, he's not got a bad kick on him, but for a climber. But yeah, beats Battistella. Fred Wright third. He'll be disappointed with that. Janssen fourth. Sweeney fifth. He got a little bit boxed in and was in the wind a lot. And then Bennett, I don't know, Bora did a big lead out for points, I guess, for sixth.
Yeah.
Yeah, weird stage.
Exactly. And arguably, Jesus Hirata is the rider that I would say before the sprint, oh, this is the rider I expect the least from. I was literally joking on the sofa before they got to the sprint. Well, the one rider we can't expect to win here is Jesus Hirata, right? And then he ends up winning the stage. So, bad prediction on that regard. But when it comes to the final sprint, it's so clear that Ride went so early. But you did mention it. That downhill sprint, obviously, we've spoken about it enough. In the parkour guidelines, it says that a downhill that significantly improves the speed, increases the speed, should not be at the end of a stage in terms of the sprint. Now, whether that applies here or not, I don't know. I don't know the gradients by heart. But perhaps Wright overestimated the descent there. Perhaps Wright was like, okay, it's a descent finish. I need to make sure I launch relatively early because that's going to be beneficial. But the issue is also that I think what benefited Herrera as well is that the rider in the wheel of Wright, which was Janssens, lost the wheel of Wright in the sprint, which means that Herrera
And
could
moved to
use
the
that
side.
draft. What, sorry?
And he moved to the side. He didn't just lose the wheel in a straight line and Harada has to go around him. He very, very nicely moved to the right, or maybe right moved to the left a little bit too, and just opened up the perfect slipstream for Harada. So, yeah, I think position was hugely important. And I say Wright bottled it. He did. But I don't know what the car's telling him. Like, these things
Yeah.
can be fixed. The car has the responsibility to be telling them the situation, what to do. I know it's like heat of the moment, but you really can help a little bit from the car, a lot, I think, and be like, just do not launch at, like, he's got a better sprint than these guys.
Yep.
Yeah,
Battistella. He sprints from, I think, last position in the group here, and he ends up so close to the victory. Did he end up in the worst position by being that far? Do you think if he was
I think
closer
so.
that he might have gotten the victory?
I think so. I don't think I don't know what his plan was, but yeah, I mean, maybe a mistake to be on Herrada's wheel. If I was him, I would have wanted to be on Fred Wright's wheel. He probably wins Battistella easily if he's on Fred Wright's wheel going into the sprint, but he wasn't. He came finished late, and I guess, yeah, unlucky for him. So, weird stage, weird finish. Fred Wright, it will come. He's been a bit unlucky, or today was a little bit self-imposed, but he's so strong. It's unfortunate when you're like, happen to Vine a fair bit, like in Turkey, when
Yeah.
these guys don't have like prolific wins yet because they've shown themselves to be so strong. Everyone marks them anyway. Anyway, tomorrow's stage, no GC changes, is a good one. Could be a big one. 155 Ks from La Pola, Javiana to Colau Fanquaya, which it's a hard stage. It starts 7K, 6.3% climb, flat section, 7K, 6%, another 3 medium mountain climbs, then finishes We're 10.2 Ks at 8%, and the first 3 Ks are 6.5%. So the last, I don't know, like the last 2 Ks are like 9% of this. It's pretty hard. This climb. It's like the second hardest climb most of the Vuelta after Sierra Nevada. And I don't know what Quickstep are going to do because their team doesn't look very. To be honest, Benji, tomorrow, given how strong Evenepoel looked on the final climb, the last thing I want to do if I'm Ineos, Bora, and Jumbo Visma is to just have an easy-ish stage and then have
Yeah,
Evenepoel send the final climb. I think this is a stage tomorrow to put a lot of pressure on Quickstep and Evenepoel, particularly as it starts with a climb where half his team could drop.
exactly. Now, the question is, well, first of all, I hope that it's coverage from the start on this stage because that initial climb makes the breakaway fight very important and the potential controlling from the peloton as well. What will Quickstep do when certain teams that are opposing them are going to send riders in the breakaway? And which opposing team has the balls to do so early on? Because let's look at GC for like a second here. We've got Ineos with 3 riders in the top 10, Sivakov, Gegenharding, Rodriguez. Bora has, I think, 2 riders still in the top 15, being Hindley, Kelderman. If you count the top 18, Higuita as well. Is Higuita far enough where you think, let's go early with this rider? Is Carapaz close enough on 256 to put Quickstep under pressure on this stage by going early? I'd
Plat,
argue that's a good card to
Catalunya.
play. I like that card.
Isn't this like the stage where it started with a climb that Plapp sent in Catalunya? That didn't have a long climb to finish. Plapp could just launch this out the gate, and he will drop. He will hopefully he can't get in the car because he's got another 2.5 weeks. But he'll put Quickstep under a lot of pressure. It could just be Remco left.
Yeah, and if that is the case, when they put pressure, like, what happens then? Like, when Carapaz goes early on a stage like this and he is able to get away in a group, that's a good situation to put pressure on Quickstep. But if Evenepoel is with this man, then what are we thinking? Because if you're Carapaz, then you're kind of in a situation of like, well, then we got to sit up again, and like, then there's no value in that, right?
I mean, I like very aggressive, unorthodox things to even up the odds or achieve results. So I would get satellite riders in the break. If I was opposing Quickstep, I would say that Quickstep cannot do shit to stop that. And if Remco has to close it himself, all the better. Like we saw in Basque Country, the final stage, he was getting attacked, and it is a cost. I know he's in much different shape to that. There's then
Yeah,
long flats here between these climbs, which if you have help can extend the gap, and if it makes it harder as well, the climbs for the domestiques of Remco to come back. That being said, it's his terrain, but if you're forcing him, like, I don't think he's going to counter and just go solo fast. So
yeah.
like the risk, like you have to use the multiple teammates. Even Carapaz, as you said, he's not that far back. So this is the Mast doesn't really have to, but Mast is very, very strong. Um, I don't know. I would try it. I would try it tomorrow if I was Jumbo, Ineos, or Bora Hansgrohe. Even Bahrain with like
Hmm.
Santi and Maida. Like, why not?
But who wins the stage? Because we're talking about GC opportunities here. Do you think that the Peloton wins or the breakaway? I'm actually like, I don't know. I think the amount of climbs that are here together might signify that it might be a bit of an active stage, which might lead to the Peloton actually ending up winning the stage. But we've seen a very strong Mark Padun yesterday, for example, and he's the kind of card where I'm like, Padun could win the stage, for example. What do you think?
I think, yeah, either Padun, Evenepoel, or Vine win the stage. Padun looks so good. I don't know what the weather is. Don't know what the weather is. I'm going with Vine. Vine wins the stage. He'll probably
Okay.
get, if he gets in the break, he'll get attacked in that valley after the 4K 8% climb before the final climb. That's the problem for him. Same with Padun. Like they're both, everyone knows how strong they are. And from the GC group, Evenepoel should look to take more time. If he gets to the base of that climb without any issues, he should torch everybody, to be honest.
Yeah, I firmly agree. Note, by the way, Butrago lost 16 minutes today. Does that mean that he's one of the riders that will be sent
Okay.
full with? What, sorry?
Put him in the breakaway stage win category then.
Okay, there we go. And I also see that there's too much as Nordsgaards in this list of riders, so I don't know how correct the list was. Nonetheless, we've got Butrago, Padden, and Vine as selected individuals for tomorrow's stage from a breakaway. And to be honest, when it comes to Vine and Padden, you never know if it's also from the GC group sometimes. But when it comes to GC, Evenepoel taking more time, because that's what we want to see in this first week, with Roglic being weaker on paper after the performance he had on the rainy uphill we had yesterday, then you expect Quickstep to punch even more on a stage like this. So firmly agree with that, and that's how I also view this upcoming stage.
Who you got winning? I got
Oh,
Evenepoel. No, I picked
pardon?
Vine. So you got Padun?
Yeah.
Okay. Padun looked very, very good, and the descent maybe won't cost him as much if it's dry. Anyway, yeah, that's it's a bit flat the run in, so he should be okay. Yeah, suits Sivakov as well. Look to him to be aggressive. Really, really suits him this stage. But that's all from us. Shorter stage, quick recap. Big weekend of racing coming up. We'll also talk about Deutschland Tour results maybe tomorrow, or no, when it wraps up. Sorry. And yeah, thanks to Zwift as always, and we'll see you at the pod tomorrow. Ciao.